The air in the training hall still carried the scent of sweat and determination when Kara Gibson's foot slipped against the mat. The fall was sudden and sharp, a quick twist followed by a dull, radiating ache in her right hip. She tried to stand, but the pain flared like a warning signal, pulsing through muscle and bone. Her students rushed to her side, concerned, yet Kara forced a tight smile, insisting she was fine. She was used to bruises and sprains, but this was different. It lingered, throbbing with every small movement. By evening, the pain had grown unbearable. Sitting in her car outside the small community clinic, Kara hesitated. She had always hated hospitals, the sterile light, the faint metallic tang in the air, the sense of being reduced to symptoms and charts. Still, pride could not heal a strained hip. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the glass door and stepped inside. The reception area was quiet, almost too quiet, filled with that faint antiseptic chill that seemed to erase warmth. Kara filled out her form quickly, trying to ignore the distant sound of a clock ticking above her head. She told herself this was routine, that it would be over soon, but the tightness in her stomach said otherwise. When the door to the examination room opened, she expected another indifferent doctor, maybe an older man with hurried words and tired eyes. Instead, Dr. Grace Kingston walked in, and for a moment Kara forgot to breathe. Grace had a calm, self-assured presence that filled the small room without a single word. Her skin glowed under the fluorescent lights, smooth and deep brown, her braids tied neatly into a low bun that framed the graceful curve of her neck. A faint gold chain glimmered at her collar, understated but elegant. Her voice, when she spoke, was low, composed, and carried the kind of steadiness that made even silence feel safe. Kara Gibson? Yes, Kara answered, her voice slightly unsteady. I'm Dr. Kingston. Let's see what's going on today. Grace's smile was small but genuine, the kind that didn't reach her lips so much as it lived quietly in her eyes. She motioned for Kara to sit on the examination table, her movements unhurried but precise. The soft rustle of the paper sheet beneath Kara felt suddenly too loud in the still room. What happened? Grace asked, slipping on her gloves. I teach Taekwondo. I fell during a class this afternoon. It's just my hip, I think. It hurts when I move. Grace nodded, her gaze focused, and scribbled a few notes before setting the clipboard aside. Let's take a look. Can you lie down for me? Kara obeyed, trying to mask her discomfort as she adjusted on the table. Grace's hands, warm even through the gloves, pressed gently against her side. Tell me if anything feels sharp or unbearable. The first touch was light, almost clinical, but the pressure deepened slowly as Grace tested the muscle tension. Her fingers moved with quiet confidence, tracing the line from Kara's waist toward her hip bone, pressing in calculated intervals. Kara's breath hitched when Grace's hand brushed closer to the sore spot. Right there, Grace asked softly. Kara nodded, her words caught somewhere between pain and awareness. Grace's tone remained professional, but something in her voice carried a faint warmth, a sensitivity that eased the tension more effectively than any medicine could. Your hip flexor is strained. You might have pulled a muscle when you fell. Grace moved to adjust the examination light, and the faint scent of her perfume drifted through the air clean, subtle, like sandalwood mixed with jasmine. Kara's senses sharpened. She watched Grace lean closer, her face partially illuminated by the cool light, every feature marked by poise and quiet strength. Can you lift your legs slightly? Grace instructed. Kara tried, but pain shot through her hip. Her hand instinctively gripped the edge of the table. Grace stepped closer, one hand steadying her leg, the other resting near her waist to support her balance. The proximity was startling. Kara could feel the warmth of her body, the slow rhythm of her breathing, the faint friction of fabric brushing against her skin. Easy, Grace murmured, her tone gentle but commanding. Let me help. Together they lifted, the motion controlled and slow. Kara's pulse quickened, not only from the ache, but from the intimate closeness. Every time Grace adjusted her hold, Kara felt the strength in her fingers, firm yet delicate. It was professional, yes, but undeniably human. When Grace finally stepped back, Kara exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The doctor's calm composure contrasted sharply with the chaos fluttering inside her. Grace made a few quick notes on the chart, then turned back. "You'll need rest for a few days," she said, removing her gloves with a quiet snap. "No training, no stretching. I'll prescribe some anti-inflammatory medication and schedule a follow-up to make sure the joint isn't inflamed." Kara nodded, still lying on the table. "Thank you, doctor." Grace paused, her hand on the door handle, and looked back. "Do you have someone who can help you around the house? You shouldn't strain yourself." The concern in her voice caught Kara off guard. "I'll manage," she replied, though she knew she probably couldn't. Grace studied her for a moment longer, then smiled faintly. "You remind me of my sister," she said. "She teaches yoga. Never listens when I tell her to rest, either." The remark broke the stiffness in the room, and Kara found herself smiling back. "Guess we're all stubborn when it comes to our bodies." "Maybe," Grace said softly. "But even strong people need care." The words lingered as she left the room, the sound of her heels fading down the hallway. Kara sat there for a long while, staring at the space she had occupied, feeling the ghost of Grace's hands still pressed against her skin. Outside, the evening air was crisp and cool, the streetlights casting a faint glow across the parking lot. Kara moved carefully, wincing with each step, but her thoughts weren't on the pain anymore. She replayed every moment in the examination room, every look, every word that had hovered just shy of being too personal. There was a connection there, subtle yet undeniable, something neither of them had acknowledged aloud. As she settled into her car, Kara found herself smiling despite the ache in her hip. The doctor's touch had been clinical, yes, but beneath that calm professionalism lay something she couldn't quite define: a spark, quiet but real, as if her body had recognized something her mind hadn't caught up to yet. That night, when she lay in bed, the dull ache in her side pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Grace Kingston's steady gaze, the faint curve of her smile, and the way her fingers had traced along her skin with both precision and care. The memory played like a slow, rhythmic echo she couldn't quiet. For the first time in her life, Kara didn't dread the idea of going back to the clinic. She caught herself wondering not about the diagnosis, but about the woman behind the white coat. And though she told herself it was just curiosity, deep down, she knew it was already something more. Kara arrived at the clinic earlier than she needed to, telling herself it was to avoid waiting too long, though she knew that wasn't true. The ache in her hip had dulled slightly overnight, yet something deeper lingered, a tension she couldn't name. As she sat in the same chair by the window, the faint hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. The sterile scent of disinfectant, once so unpleasant, now reminded her of something she couldn't quite admit out loud. When the familiar sound of heels clicked down the hallway, Kara's pulse stirred. The door opened and Dr. Grace Kingston stepped inside with that same unshakable composure. Today, her white coat hung open, revealing a soft gray blouse tucked neatly into tailored pants. Her hair was tied differently, a looser braid that framed her cheekbones and gave her a less formal glow. She carried her clipboard against her chest, her posture straight but relaxed. "Morning, Kara," she greeted, her voice calm, carrying a warmth that made the small room feel less cold. "How's the pain?" "It's better," Kara said quickly, then hesitated. "Mostly." Grace nodded as if she expected that answer. "Let's make sure you're healing properly. I'd like to check your range of motion and muscle strength. I'll help guide you through it." There was something in the way she said "help guide" that made Kara's breath catch for a moment. She nodded, and Grace motioned for her to move toward the examination table. Kara sat down slowly, the paper beneath her crackling faintly as she adjusted herself. Grace put her clipboard aside, washed her hands, and slipped on a new pair of gloves. The sound of latex stretching seemed unusually loud in the small space. She stepped closer, the faint scent of sandalwood and clean cotton drifting between them again. All right, Grace said softly. Lie back, please. Kara eased herself onto the table, her hands clutching the edge for balance. Grace's eyes met hers briefly, steady and reassuring. I'll lift your leg and rotate the joint slightly. Tell me if it hurts or feels tight. The first touch was cautious, deliberate. Grace's hand slid beneath Kara's thigh, supporting the limb as she adjusted the angle. Kara felt her fingers through the thin fabric of her athletic shorts, the pressure firm yet careful. As Grace lifted, the stretch pulled at the sore muscle, forcing a sharp inhale from Kara's chest. Breathe, Grace murmured. Her tone had softened, almost coaxing, her thumb brushing the side of Kara's leg in a quiet, steady rhythm. Don't tense up. Let the muscle relax. Kara tried, but the warmth spreading from Grace's hand made it nearly impossible to separate tension from awareness. Every movement seemed to draw them closer, the air between them charged with something that neither of them named. That's good, Grace said after a moment, lowering Kara's leg slowly. You're healing. There's still some stiffness, but your recovery looks promising. Her words were measured, yet her gaze lingered longer than it needed to. She stepped to the other side of the table and repeated the movement, this time closer. Her hand pressed at the curve of Kara's hip, guiding her body into position. The fabric of her coat brushed lightly against Kara's arm, sending a shiver up her skin. You're holding tension here, Grace said quietly, pressing her fingertips near the muscle line. It's hard not to, Kara answered before she could stop herself. Especially with you standing this close. The sentence hung in the air, bold and unfiltered. Grace paused, her expression unreadable, but her eyes flickered with something unmistakable, a mix of surprise and curiosity. Then she smiled, small and knowing, before returning her attention to the examination. I see, she replied, her tone calm yet threaded with something deeper. Then I'll try to be gentle. Her fingers pressed deeper, kneading the muscle slowly, precisely, until Kara could no longer tell whether the heat under her skin came from pain or proximity. The pressure was just enough to make her exhale shakily, and Grace's voice softened further. You're doing well, she murmured, her hand sliding down to test another point. This should loosen the tension. Every movement carried intention, yet there was tenderness hidden within the clinical touch. The rhythm of her hands became hypnotic, her fingertips tracing circles that eased pain but ignited awareness. Kara closed her eyes for a moment, trying to ground herself in the steady sound of Grace's breathing. When the doctor finally pulled back, the air felt different, charged, as if something unseen had shifted between them. Grace removed her gloves, tossed them into the bin, and reached for the chart, her voice returning to its calm steadiness. You're improving faster than expected. Keep applying the ice pack I prescribed and avoid high-impact training. Light stretching is fine, but stop if it hurts. Kara nodded, her voice softer than usual. Okay. Grace's gaze lifted from the chart. I'd like to schedule one more session, just to make sure the strain heals completely. Maybe in 3 or 4 days. That's soon. Yes, Grace said, her tone even, though the faint smile tugging at her lips hinted at something unspoken. You're a fast healer, but I want to be sure. As Kara sat up, Grace instinctively reached out to steady her by the waist. The gesture was quick, almost automatic, but their eyes met again, closer now than they'd been all morning. Neither moved for a few seconds. The air felt thick with something that had been building since the first appointment, something both of them sensed, but didn't dare name. Grace's hand lingered just a fraction too long before she withdrew. Take it slow, she said softly. Don't push yourself. I'll try, Kara replied, her voice low. But I'm not very good at waiting. That earned her another faint smile. Then think of it as discipline, not patience. Kara laughed quietly, the sound easing the tension, though her heart still raced. She watched Grace write the follow-up note, her handwriting neat and fluid, her focus complete. It struck Kara how effortlessly she carried control, how her calmness drew people in without force. It wasn't just beauty that made her captivating, it was the quiet authority in every gesture, the serenity that masked something she rarely revealed. When the visit ended, Grace walked her to the hallway. The fluorescent lights above cast a soft glow across her skin, making her eyes appear darker, almost bronze. "See you soon, Kara," she said, voice smooth and even. Kara met her gaze. "Looking forward to it," she answered, meaning far more than the words suggested. Outside, the world felt sharper, brighter, as if the air itself had changed. Kara moved slowly toward her car, every step reminding her of Grace's hands, the subtle pressure, the warmth that had lingered far longer than it should have. Later that evening, as she stood in front of her bathroom mirror, she found faint marks on her hip from where Grace had pressed. The touch had been professional, yet her skin remembered every movement, as if it had been something else entirely. She traced the area lightly with her fingers, feeling the echo of that moment. It wasn't just attraction, she realized. It was the sense of being seen, truly seen, beyond the surface of strength and skill she showed the world. Grace had looked at her not just as a patient, but as a person worth understanding. That night, when she lay in bed, Kara tried to dismiss the thoughts that kept circling back. The warmth of Grace's touch, the steadiness in her voice, the hint of curiosity behind her professionalism. The memory pulsed beneath her skin, alive and persistent. And though she knew it was wrong to crave something blurred by professional lines, she couldn't shake the feeling that what had begun as a simple medical check was turning into something far more complicated. The city streets were glowing with the fading light of early evening when Kara decided to take a short walk. The weather was cool, the kind that made the air crisp but not biting. After days of limited movement, she was restless. Her hip had improved, though it still ached if she walked too quickly, a dull reminder of the injury that had changed her routine. She needed fresh air, something to clear her thoughts after days of thinking about Dr. Grace Kingston more than she cared to admit. She took a different route this time, one that led through a quieter street lined with small cafes and bookshops. The sound of music drifted faintly from a nearby bar, mingling with the distant hum of traffic. She moved slowly, careful with each step, letting the rhythm of the evening settle around her. Then she heard raised voices ahead, sharp and unpleasant. A woman's tone, calm but strained, cut through the noise, followed by a deeper, slurred male voice laced with mockery. Kara's body reacted before her mind caught up. Her pace quickened despite the pull in her hip. As she rounded the corner, she saw them. A tall man stood too close to a woman near a lamppost, his posture aggressive, his words dripping with unwanted familiarity. And then Kara froze. The woman was Grace. She wasn't in her white coat now. She wore a black turtleneck, dark jeans, and a long beige trench coat that brushed against her knees. Her hair was down, loose and soft around her face. Even under the streetlight, she held herself with quiet dignity, but her eyes were wary. The man leaned forward, laughing, trying to touch her arm. Grace stepped back, firm but polite. Kara didn't think. She moved before her thoughts could stop her. "Hey," she called, her voice steady, but loud enough to cut through the man's drunken laughter. "She told you to back off." The man turned, his face flushed, surprise flickering into irritation. "Mind your own business," he muttered. "This is my business now," Kara replied, walking closer. The training that had been second nature for years settled into her movements. Her stance shifted, weight balanced evenly, every motion controlled. Grace's eyes widened slightly when she recognized her, but she didn't speak. The man stepped forward, puffing his chest. "What, you think you can scare me off?" Kara didn't answer. She simply moved into the light, her tone even but cold. "Walk away." He sneered, muttering something incoherent, and reached for her shoulder. The instant his hand lifted, Kara reacted. Her arm snapped up, deflecting the motion, pivoting on her good leg. She caught his wrist and twisted just enough to make him yelp and stumble back. It wasn't violent, only precise. He swore under his breath, clutching his arm, glaring between the two women. Try it again, and you'll regret it, Kara said quietly. That seemed to do it. The man backed off, muttering curses as he turned away, disappearing down the street. For a moment, the world went still. The sound of distant traffic returned, the faint hum of the city filling the silence. Grace looked at Kara, her expression a mixture of relief and disbelief. Are you all right? Kara asked, her voice softer now. Grace nodded slowly, still catching her breath. I'm fine. You didn't have to do that, but I'm glad you did. Kara smiled faintly, shaking her head. He shouldn't have touched you. Grace studied her, eyes shimmering under the lamplight. Remind me never to argue with a Taekwondo instructor. That earned a small laugh from Kara, easing the last of the tension. Only if you promise not to get cornered on quiet streets. I'll try, Grace said, smiling now, her tone light again. I owe you a thank you. Kara waved a hand. You don't owe me anything. I just happened to be here. Still, Grace said, stepping closer, you were exactly where I needed you. There was something in her voice that made the air between them shift. It wasn't just gratitude anymore. It was something warmer, heavier, a quiet current running beneath the surface. They walked together toward the main road, the soft rhythm of their steps matching. Grace's arm brushed against Kara's and neither moved away. The contact was small but grounding. Do you live nearby? Kara asked, more to fill the silence than anything. Just a few blocks from here, Grace replied. I was heading home when that man appeared out of nowhere. Then let me walk you, Kara said without hesitation. Grace glanced at her as if weighing the offer, then nodded. All right. As they walked, the city unfolded in muted tones of gold and blue. Streetlights flickered on, windows glowed from distant apartments, and the scent of rain lingered faintly in the cool air. Grace spoke first, her voice soft. You surprised me tonight. I didn't expect to see you again so soon. Kara glanced at her with a faint smile. Maybe it's fate. Grace chuckled under her breath. You sound like one of my patients who believes in signs. And do you? Kara asked, curious. I don't know, Grace admitted. But maybe I'm starting to. They reached a corner where the street split into two directions. Grace stopped in front of a narrow townhouse with ivy climbing up the wall. She turned to face Kara, her hands tucked into her coat pockets. This is me. Looks peaceful, Kara said. It usually is, Grace replied, her lips curving into a gentle smile. Except for unexpected rescues. Kara laughed quietly. I can't promise to stop showing up at random, but I'll try to give you warning next time. Grace tilted her head slightly, her eyes holding Kara's for longer than necessary. You don't need a warning. I think I like surprises. The words carried a weight that settled between them. For a long moment, neither spoke. The world around them felt distant, like everything had faded except the space they occupied. Grace's hair caught the faint glow from the porch light, her features soft yet defined, and Kara found herself unable to look away. Would you like to come in for some tea? Grace asked suddenly, her tone casual, but her eyes betraying the hesitation behind it. Kara hesitated only for a breath before shaking her head gently. I should let you rest. You've had enough excitement tonight. Grace nodded slowly, a hint of disappointment flickering before she masked it. All right. But next time, I'm the one inviting you under calmer circumstances. Deal, Kara said, smiling. Grace reached out then, just lightly, her hand brushing Kara's arm. Thank you again. For stepping in. Kara met her gaze, her voice low. I couldn't not. Grace's fingers lingered for a second before she pulled back. Good night, Kara. Good night, Doctor. As Grace stepped inside, closing the door softly behind her, Kara stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, watching the warm light through the window fade into the shadows. The night air was cool against her skin, but the memory of Grace's touch felt warmer than the air around her. Walking home, she tried to convince herself it was nothing more than coincidence, just a chance encounter between two people who happened to cross paths again. But deep down, she knew better. Something had shifted tonight. The image of Grace standing under that lamplight, poised but vulnerable, replayed in her mind with every step. Kara realized that what had begun as an unspoken tension in a clinic room was now growing into something far more dangerous, something she couldn't easily ignore. The ache in her hip had faded, but another ache, deeper and far more persistent, had taken its place. And for the first time, she didn't want it to stop. 3 days passed after the night in the street, but the memory refused to fade. Kara thought about Grace more than she cared to admit, her mind replaying fragments of that evening, the faint quiver in Grace's voice when she said thank you, the subtle brush of her hand, the way her eyes had softened in the glow of the lamplight. Every recollection lingered like a song that refused to end. It was late afternoon when her phone buzzed. The message appeared simple at first glance, yet the sight of the name on the screen sent a pulse through her chest. Grace Kingston, I made too much food tonight. Care to help me fix that mistake? Kara stared at the text, her lips curving despite herself. The invitation was casual, but beneath it, there was an undercurrent she could feel, something unspoken yet deliberate. Her fingers hovered for a moment before she typed back, I'd be happy to help. What time? The reply came instantly. 7. Bring an appetite. When the evening came, Kara found herself standing outside Grace's townhouse again, but this time, everything felt different. The same ivy climbed the wall, the same golden light spilled through the front windows, yet the air between them seemed charged with new meaning. She hesitated for a heartbeat, then knocked gently. The door opened almost at once. Grace stood there, wearing a deep green sweater and black slacks, her hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders. The sight made Kara forget, momentarily, how to form words. Grace's smile was small, sincere, touched with something softer than she had shown before. Come in, she said, stepping aside. I'm glad you came. The warmth of the house was immediate. It smelled faintly of roasted herbs and something buttery. Soft jazz played from a speaker somewhere nearby, blending with the hum of the oven. The contrast to the cold formality of the clinic was striking. Here, the woman who had once seemed unreachable was surrounded by warmth, color, and quiet comfort. I didn't picture you as someone who cooks, Kara said as she stepped inside. Grace laughed lightly, leading her toward the kitchen. It helps me unwind. You can tell a lot about a person by the way they cook. Then what does this say about you? That I like order, Grace said, stirring a pot. And control, mostly. Kara leaned against the counter, watching her move. The way Grace's hands worked, steady and elegant, reminded her of the same precision she used in the clinic. But there was something freer now, more relaxed. Her sleeves were pushed up to her elbows, and a faint flush colored her cheeks from the heat of the stove. Kara found herself studying her more openly than she should have. You always this composed? Grace looked up briefly, meeting her gaze. Not always. I just try to be. Even when someone saves you from a drunk in the street? A hint of amusement touched Grace's lips. Especially then. Their eyes held for a second longer than necessary before Grace turned back to the pot. Dinner's almost ready. Why don't you open that bottle of wine on the table? Kara obeyed, grateful for the small task. She poured 2 glasses and handed one to Grace, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The contact sent a flicker of warmth up Kara's arm. Grace noticed it too, though she didn't comment. Instead, she lifted her glass, her expression unreadable. To unexpected timing. To second chances, Kara added quietly, and they drank. Dinner was simple but perfect. Roasted chicken, vegetables glistening with olive oil, a loaf of fresh bread still warm from the oven. Conversation flowed easily, their words weaving between laughter and long silences that didn't need to be filled. Grace asked about Kara's work, genuinely curious about the discipline and structure of martial arts. Kara, in turn, learned that Grace painted when she had time, small abstract pieces that she never showed anyone. When they finished eating, Grace leaned back, her smile lazy and content. I haven't had company like this in a long time, she admitted. Because of work? Kara asked. Grace nodded. When you spend your days listening to people's pain, you start to forget what ordinary conversation feels like. But tonight, I didn't feel like a doctor. Kara set her glass down, her voice softer. Then what did you feel like? Grace looked at her, the light from the nearby lamp catching the brown in her eyes, turning it to liquid amber. Like myself. Silence followed, thick and intimate. The air between them hummed with something fragile but magnetic. Grace stood and began clearing the table, perhaps to ground herself, perhaps to escape the weight of the moment. Kara rose to help, brushing close as she reached for the plates. Their arms grazed, and Grace froze for the briefest instant. "You should sit," Grace said quietly, but her voice lacked conviction. "I'd rather help," Kara replied, moving a little closer. The scent of rosemary and wine hung between them. Grace turned slightly, her face just inches away now. The steady composure that Kara had admired so much seemed to falter. She could see the faint rise and fall of Grace's breath, the small pulse beneath her jaw, the flicker of something uncertain but wanting in her eyes. "You're staring," Grace said softly. "Maybe," Kara whispered. "But you're not telling me to stop." Grace's lips parted, then curved faintly. "You're right." For a moment, neither moved. Then Grace reached out, fingers brushing Kara's wrist, the same spot she had touched during the examination days ago. The contact was light, tentative, yet it carried the same electric charge. Kara's breath caught as Grace's thumb traced along the veins of her hand, slow and deliberate. "Does it still hurt?" Grace asked, her voice low, her gaze flicking briefly to Kara's hip. "Only when I move too fast," Kara murmured. "Then don't move too fast," Grace said, and her hand slid upward, resting gently at Kara's waist. The distance between them disappeared. Kara didn't know who leaned in first, only that the space closed naturally, like gravity drawing two bodies together. Their lips met in a kiss that began soft, hesitant, but deepened quickly into something that felt inevitable. The taste of wine lingered, mingling with warmth and breath. When they finally broke apart, Grace didn't step back. Her forehead rested lightly against Kara's. "I shouldn't," she whispered, though the words held no real resistance. Kara smiled faintly. "Then don't say it." Grace laughed under her breath, the sound quiet and trembling. "You're impossible." "Maybe," Kara said, "but you don't seem to mind." Grace's fingers tightened slightly at her waist, a silent confession that words couldn't carry. They stood there for a long moment, the world outside forgotten. It was only when the clock chimed softly from the living room that Grace finally exhaled and stepped back, though her eyes lingered on Kara's lips. "I should get you some dessert," she said, her tone an attempt at normalcy. Kara shook her head with a small grin. "I think I've had enough sweetness for one night." Grace smiled at that, the tension dissolving into something gentler. "You should still rest. Your hip needs time." "Is that medical advice or something else?" "Maybe both," Grace replied, her eyes glinting. Kara took a step toward the door, pausing as she turned back. "If I told you I'd like to see you again, outside this house or your clinic, would that be too forward?" Grace tilted her head, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "Maybe just forward enough." Kara nodded, her voice soft. "Then I'll call you soon." As she left, the night air felt lighter, almost tender. Kara glanced back once to see Grace standing by the doorway, one hand resting on the frame, her expression calm, but her eyes full of quiet longing. The street was silent except for the distant hum of the city, but inside Kara's chest, her heart was far from still. She knew something irreversible had happened tonight, something that couldn't be undone by morning. What had started with pain and professionalism had become something that lived in the space between restraint and desire. And for the first time, neither of them seemed willing to pretend otherwise. Morning sunlight spilled through Kara's window, soft and golden, warming the sheets tangled around her legs. For a moment she stayed still, her eyes half open, her mind suspended between sleep and memory. The night before played faintly in her mind the feel of Grace's hand resting on her waist, the taste of her breath, the quiet confession carried not in words, but in the space between them. Every fragment of it felt impossibly vivid, like something that had been waiting to happen. She turned on her side, staring at the faint light tracing the outline of her wall. Her hip no longer throbbed the way it had a week ago. The ache had softened, leaving behind a sense of release, as if her body had finally caught up with the calm that had started to bloom inside her. But something else had taken its place, a tension that came not from injury but from longing. The phone on her nightstand buzzed softly. She reached for it, expecting some mundane notification, but when she saw the message, her lips curved without thought. "Hope you slept well. I'm at the park near the river if you feel like taking a walk." It was signed simply G. Kara read it twice before answering. "Give me 15 minutes. By the time she arrived, the sun had climbed higher, filtering through the trees. The park was quiet, dotted with early joggers and a few children chasing bubbles along the grass. Grace stood near the edge of the path, her posture relaxed, a travel mug in her hand. The breeze lifted strands of her hair, brushing them gently across her cheek. She looked nothing like the woman Kara had first met in the sterile light of the clinic. Here, she was simply herself, warm, grounded, and radiantly alive. "You made it," Grace said when Kara approached, her voice carrying a note of pleasure she didn't bother to hide. "I said I'd be 15 minutes, Kara replied, smiling. "You didn't think I'd skip, did you?" "I wasn't sure," Grace teased lightly. "You're unpredictable. Only when I have a reason." Their eyes met for a moment, and the smile that passed between them said more than either was ready to put into words. They began walking, their pace slow and easy. Grace offered Kara the second mug she was carrying. "Black coffee, 2 sugars." "I remembered." Kara accepted it, surprised and touched. "You really pay attention." "I'm trained to notice details," Grace said, her tone playful, though her gaze softened as she looked at her. "But with you, it's different. I don't feel like I'm studying someone. I just notice." They walked in silence after that, the kind of quiet that felt natural. Birds sang overhead, the wind stirred the leaves, and the path wound gently along the riverbank. Kara's body moved with ease now, the stiffness mostly gone, though every step still reminded her of how it had all begun the fall, the clinic, the first touch. It felt distant and yet impossibly close, like a story she had lived and was still living. When they reached a shaded bench overlooking the water, Grace sat, motioning for Kara to join her. "You look better," she said softly. "Your movement, your posture. It's good to see." "Maybe I just had the right doctor," Kara said, and Grace's laugh came quietly, the kind that reached her eyes. "Careful," she said. "Flattery makes me suspicious." "It's not flattery if it's true." Grace tilted her head slightly, her expression gentle. "You're dangerous when you talk like that." "Dangerous how?" "In ways that make people forget their boundaries." Kara smiled faintly, the words hanging between them. "You say that like it's a bad thing." Grace didn't answer immediately. She looked out at the river, her fingers wrapped around the mug, the sunlight glinting against the metal rim. "It can be," she said finally. "But not always." There was a pause, filled only by the sound of moving water. Kara leaned back, studying her. "You're thinking about what happened, aren't you?" Grace's lips parted, then pressed together again, as if she were weighing the truth. "I am. It's complicated. I crossed a line last night. Professionally, I mean. I've spent my career keeping emotion out of what I do, and suddenly one evening, all that control was gone." Kara turned toward her, her tone calm but steady. "You didn't cross a line alone." Grace looked at her, the honesty in her eyes mirrored by something fragile. "You make it sound simple." "Maybe it is," Kara said softly. "We met, we connected, and we stopped pretending that something wasn't there. That doesn't make it wrong." Grace studied her for a long moment. The struggle in her gaze was subtle but real. "You make me want to believe that," she murmured. "Then believe it." Kara reached for her hand without hesitation. The contact was warm, sure, a simple gesture that carried more truth than any declaration could. Grace didn't pull away. Instead, Her fingers intertwined with Kara's, a silent acknowledgement that what existed between them no longer needed justification. They sat like that for a while, the river shimmering before them, the sunlight filtering through branches. The world felt quiet, suspended, as if it had paused to let them exist outside its rules for just a little longer. When Grace finally spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "You've changed something in me. I didn't expect that." Kara smiled faintly. "You changed something in me first." Grace shook her head lightly, a breath of laughter escaping her. "Maybe it's a fair exchange then." The tension that had always lived beneath their words eased, replaced by a sense of acceptance. There was no pretense left, no need to analyze or question what had already been decided by the way their hearts had chosen to beat in unison. As the sun began to dip lower, casting the park in amber tones, Grace stood and extended her hand. "Come on," she said. "I'll walk you back." Doctor's orders. Kara took it, letting Grace pull her up. "You realize I'm not your patient anymore, right?" Grace smiled, her fingers still laced with hers. "Good. That means I don't have to keep pretending I'm not thinking about you." The walk back was slower than before. The world around them felt softer, quieter, as if tuned to the rhythm of their steps. When they reached the street where their paths would part, neither seemed ready to say goodbye. Grace looked up at her, the fading light painting her skin in shades of gold and rose. "You should rest," she said gently. "Your body's healed, but healing doesn't stop there." Kara tilted her head. "And what about you?" Grace hesitated, then smiled. "I'm working on it." Kara reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Maybe we can help each other with that." For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Grace leaned in, closing the distance in one slow, deliberate motion. The kiss was softer this time, filled not with urgency but with certainty, the kind that promised continuation rather than closure. It felt like a vow whispered in silence, a quiet assurance that what had begun in pain would grow in peace. When they finally parted, Grace's eyes held that same steady warmth Kara had seen on the first day, only now it was touched with something freer, something wholly human. "You really don't listen to advice, do you?" she teased. Kara laughed softly. "Only when it's worth ignoring." Grace shook her head, smiling, her hand still resting against Kara's arm. "Then maybe I'll stop giving it." "Please don't," Kara whispered. "I like it when you tell me what to do." Grace's laughter melted into the evening air, light and unguarded. "You're impossible." "And you're still here," Kara replied. "I guess that makes us both impossible." They stood there until the streetlights flickered on, bathing them in silver and shadow. When Kara finally walked away, she didn't look back because she didn't need to. The connection between them no longer relied on sight. It was woven through everything, a pulse beneath her skin, the warmth lingering on her lips, the quiet certainty that she had found something worth staying for. That night, as she lay in bed again, she didn't dream of pain or fear or control. She dreamed of steady hands, a soft laugh, the scent of coffee and jasmine. She dreamed of a love that healed without needing to be hidden, one that began in a moment of care and became something fearless. And when she woke, the sun was rising once more, spilling light across her room like a promise kept. Love is rarely loud. Sometimes it begins in the quiet places, between a heartbeat and a hesitant glance, between fear and the courage to reach out. Kara and Grace found each other in the space where pain met tenderness, where healing turned into something deeper than either expected. Their story reminds us that connection can bloom in unexpected rooms, and that love, once seen for what it truly is, never needs to hide. This is She and She, where every story begins with a spark and ends with the truth of two hearts finding home.